Alright, hello and welcome to another tutorial in Maya. Today it's all about particles, and in this case I have a particle grid, and I'm working with an airfield and a particle grid, and I have it inside of a volume. The volume is a sphere right down here. So before we get started, don't worry about it. Let's just take a look at how to work with this and what we're looking at when we're looking at using a particle system like this. As you can see here, it has a volume primitive around it, which is just basically a wire cage, a sphere, and it contains these particles. And if I play the simulation from the point I have it at right now, you'll notice that it sort of does some cool stuff, and all the particles stay within that volume. So we're going to work with the airfield and a particle grid, and we're going to just sort of create some quick particles and work with them. And you don't really have to worry about anything at the moment, because I think it's more important that you see just how this system works and what the variables are for controlling a particle grid like this. So let's get started. As you can see here, I have a volume control assigned to this particle grid, and it's just a basic sphere. And if I take that sphere off, I'm going to go ahead and stop the simulation, rewind to the beginning, and let's take that sphere and we'll just set it to none for the moment. Well, now I basically just have a particle grid, and I have my airfield right there. So if I come up here and let's go to the outliner. It's good to have your outliner open when you're dealing with this kind of thing, because I usually just put it right here and I can switch quickly between my particle and my airplane. So that's that. So let's look at this plane air field for a moment. As you can see, it's set by default. Well, actually it's not default right now, because I have been messing with it. So I have a whole bunch of different values plugged in there. But let's just take a look at a couple of things to be like from where I'm at right now. I have it at a 1200 frame animation, and I'm going to go ahead and hit play. And essentially that's the airfield, and it's pushing up on those particles. And I'll scroll back here a little bit. Let's zoom out. And as you can see, they're just rising into the air. They're sort of pinned on the corners. And that's basically what that airfield is doing. It's pushing air straight up through these particles. And it has a fall off, so that the intensity is a little bit higher at the top than it is at the bottom. And we're going to take a look at those controls right now. As you can see, I have the airfield chosen in my outliner. So if you make sure you have your tab on and choose your plane, choose your airfield, and we'll rewind to the beginning and just check this out. The plane airfield, if you come over here to your show manipulator tool, it should be right here, say it'll be show manipulator, and click on that, you'll notice that you'll get a little bit of a indication as to what your attenuation is, what your max distance is, and what your magnitude is. And these can be clicked on and varied a little bit from here to there. So to show you this concept, I'll just go ahead and bring this into the very center point in here, my attenuation. And you'll notice that it updates over here in the attenuation line. So now if I play this simulation, you'll notice that the particles sort of move upward, and they don't really go past this point. They will, but at a very much slower rate as they make their way out toward the edges. So that's something to be aware of right there. And that's kind of the concept. Now watch this. If I bring this attenuation out, I'll say to there, let's bring the max distance in to a little bit more like that, and just mess around with these controls, and make sure you're on rewind your animation and then play, and you'll see that it sort of has an effect on the overall shape and just the fall off of how these particles are moving there. So right now our max distance is set to 6.22 or something like that, and over here you'll notice that in your distance here it's set at max distance. Now watch what happens when I move that. I'm going to hit pause, and as I move this max distance, you'll notice that over here underneath your distance menu you'll see use max distance, and this will change. So as I pull that out, you'll notice that the slider moves with it, and that sort of, you know, mimics what you're doing over here. But this gives you a visual representation of where your maximum distance is, where let's say I want all those particles to be affected. I might want to pull this out here to, you know, well beyond the particle grid, and just sort of move this, you know, down into a slope that I like there. I'll rewind the animation and hit play. And really this gives you kind of a more of a visual representation of what's happening with that max distance. For me might be a little high, so I might move it in, and we'll take another render. You'll see it goes slower and falls off more easily toward the edges, so that's nice. Okay, so essentially that's it as far as using this manipulator tool. Now you'll notice that magnitude and attenuation are your main attributes up here, as well as direction, speed, and, you know, inherent velocity doesn't really matter as much right now, but really what we're interested in is in these. So I'll tell you what, let's see if we can work our way through this, build a particle grid and attach that airfield and start playing with all of the controls, and I mean every single one of them. So that's kind of what we're going to be working with here. It's really fun. You can use these in titling and just about anything that you want to do. So let's get started. I think we'll just open up a new scene, and I don't need to save that one. And in this case I have just a grid, new scene going here. So great. Well, the first thing you want to do is make sure, in this case we're just going to be working with the general dynamics menu. Okay, just go into your general dynamics menu, and what we're interested in here is particles, the particle tool, and go ahead and hit your options right there. In Maya 2009 it might look a little different than it does here, but you'll notice that you have something in that particle that gives you this particle tool selection, and that's kind of what we're interested in. In this case, my settings, I'm going to go ahead and just reset the tool, and that's probably good practice to do when you're using your particle tool, because sometimes you'll come in and you'll change things around. But in this case, while we're building this particle grid, you want to choose particle tool and reset tool. And in the minimum corner, well actually first you want to look at your settings down here, and we want to select create particle grid. And when we do that, we also want to switch over to with text fields. Now I'm not really too familiar with all the stuff about yeah, this particle field, but anyway, or why it's text. That's what I'm confused about most of the time. Why does it say text field, and how come I have to do this? But anyway, when you choose this with text field and you bring your cursor out, you'll notice that it has a little, well, kind of like an X with a crosshair. And what we want to do, that's our particle tool. And with that particle tool, we don't want to do anything quite yet. We want to actually look at a minimum corner value and a maximum corner value. And in this case, let's set our minimum corner value to a -10. All right, and let's set the Y value to 0, and let's set the Z value to -10 as well. Now on the maximum, let's come over here and do a +10, and then a 0 and a +10. And I think that should give us a good particle grid. 10, 0, yeah, okay. All right, so now that you have your settings set up like that, all you have to do is come over here and hover, and as you'll notice that when you use this particle tool, down here in your info line, you'll notice that when I'm hovering over here, it says particle tool, and it says particle tool grid, place with text fields, set text fields for lower left, which is this corner right here, and upper right, which is this one right here. So essentially what it wants you to do is just say, click on, I'm going to click on this in the center of this box right here, and I'm going to come over and click in the center of this box right here. And then I'm going to hit the enter button on the keyboard. Ah, beautiful particle grid. Okay, so now we have a start, and this may or may not work the same on your system. I don't know. Sometimes this part, setting up a particle grid like this can be messed up by your previous settings or whatnot. But anyway, it should give you a particle grid, and in this case, it gave me a particle grid with point-shaped particles. So the best thing to do is come over into the outliner, take a look, and say, okay, I have my particles. There they are. And let's look at that particle shape for a second. You may need to come over and hit your tabs to get into your tab section. And in this case, I'm looking at my particle shape 1. It has a Lambert one. And in this case, I can tell these are points. So usually I like to scroll down and open up, a lot of these. But in this case, I think it just render attributes is good enough for the moment. So if you open your render attributes, you can see where my particle render type is points. Well, I'm going to switch that real quick because I want spheres, and so I'm going to choose spheres. But as you see, it gives me a default value that has a radius that's huge. I want those to be a little bit smaller, so I'm going to go ahead and click in current render type, and just it'll give me when I do that, it gives me a value that I can lower that. Alright, so now as I bring that value down, I'm starting to get spheres the way I want them to look. So I think I'll stay with that for the moment, and that's a radius of about 1.38. Great. Okay, well, let's take a look at a couple other things in these in the particle shape. But first, let's open our hypershade. All right, and go over there, open up your hypershade. And in this case, I think I just want to create a quick Lambert, so just click on your Lambert and move your hypershade out of the way. And I think I want to set that Lambert's color right here to, say just a greenish. Let's go on the lighter side. Let's go a red. Let's go something like that, like a pinky. Okay, so now we're playing with some little pink balls. Great. All right, so let's do this. Let's select our particles and right click, go down to existing material and assign it that new material. And essentially they should be showing up as those blue balls. So make sure you're in your shaded view and that you got your textures on or whatever, and you can leave your wireframe off because we don't need it. Alright, so now we have a beautiful particle grid. If I were to take a quick render, I would notice that it looks like nothing. Okay, well that's because I'm in Maya software. I like to use Mental Ray for this, or working with particles and stuff. I like to work with Mental Ray. And in this case, that's kind of what it looks like now. These are just, it's not really like the lights are out on these little particles. It's just something that's happening with the first render on the first frame. But if I were to maybe go forward, or after we start the simulation, those will go away. So no big deal. That looks great. Okay, so now we have a particle grid. And what we want to do to this particle grid now is we want to select the particles. And we want to come up to fields and assign it an air field, just a simple air field. So if you go to that air field and just go ahead and click, there you go. So let's look at our animation. It's about 24 frames now. Let's really give it like about 1200 frames, and that'll just give the simulation a long time to play. So that's what we're going to be working with, is 1200 frames. And make sure you're at the beginning of your animation and go ahead and hit play. Now, if all is well, this air field that we just attached is, it's now on your particles, and there you go. You have a particle grid that's floating up into space. Let's go back to the beginning. And there it is. Awesome. Okay, well, you notice that it's floating upward. Well, that's because it's going up in the y-axis. Now if I were to switch that, if I come over here, I can look at some various things that are going on with that particle grid, or I mean my airfield. In this case, I think what I'll do first is adjust my max distance, which is down here, and I think I'll take a look at this fall-off curve. So first, what you want to do is come over and grab that manipulator tool, and you can see where my max distance is set all the way out here, and my attenuation is at 1. I'm going to maybe bring that max distance in a little bit, and I think I might bring this attenuation down or up a little bit like that, and just do a quick play and sort of take a look at it. And that looks pretty cool. We're just starting to work with the particles, so that's cool. Let's maybe up the magnitude a little bit, make them go up a little bit more there. All right, so as you can see, I have some basic properties set for this, and you can play around with these all you want. Adjust your magnitude, adjust your attenuation. The magnitude right now is in the straight upward at 9.5. Well, watch when I bring that down to a negative value. You'll notice that the tool itself indicates where it's going to go, and now it falls out. So that's kind of cool. So, you know, remember, you got those options of any kind of movement that you want to give to them. So there they go into the negative value. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and bring that back up to the positive value for a second. We'll bring it up to maybe about 5 or so. And now we're going to look at the speed. The speed is just that. How fast are those, you know, how fast is it moving? I'm going to move this way down to a value of about, you know, there. And I'll go ahead and hit play. And it'll take a little while longer to start off. It sort of gives you a slower start. Let's go back to the beginning there and take a look. All right. So yeah, you can see what they're doing. They're going a little slower. Now let's change up to speed, and let's go way up there. Let's see here. All right, let's go over here and move the speed way up. Just give it a value of 1. I'm going to come over here and do another play, and you'll notice that those particles are going much faster. And that's just another, you know, control that you have up here. Inherent velocity I wouldn't worry about for the moment. Just forget about that for the moment. But let's come down here now, and let's look at the direction. Right now it's at positive 1, but if we decide to use, like, say, spread, and I go ahead and click on enable spread, all right, and rewind to the beginning of the animation, you'll notice that nothing really happens. And you know, that's basically because the wind or the air is going straight up. And in this case, we may want to switch that up and give a direction that blows across the scene. So maybe I'll put this direction over here in the X as 1, and put this one back to 0, and you know, maybe just leave that one at 0. And we'll go ahead and take another play. And as you can see, the particles start to move in the direction of the spread, you know, and that's pretty cool. So that's sort of the beginning of a refined effect there. It sort of gives you a nice particle wipe, so to speak. And remember, you always want to look at these at some various angles, because, you know, it opens up possibilities, creative possibilities, with using particles to kind of, you know, open up and reveal things, and in a real geometrically beautiful way. So those are just cool. All right. So anyway, don't forget about your overhead view, or, you know, maybe underneath. So let's come back here. I'll come back into my home view, and let's take that spread off. But before we do that, let's actually add a value of 1 over here as well. All right. And we'll go with that. And let's see what happens just for kicks and grins. All right, so it takes it from this corner to that corner. So now it gives it more of a radial outward wipe like that. All right, so that's what you're dealing with spread there. But remember, if you if the air field is going straight up, like as a 1 positive in the y-axis, then it won't have any effect at all. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just rewind there. I'm going to take off enable spread, and now we're going to look at the use max distance and what this fall-off curve is all about. And this is probably one of the coolest things about using a particle grid and a fall-off curve. In order to add some points to this, what we have to do to do anything with this is give it some values. Right now it's set at default at none, but if I bring this down quite a bit and just play the animation, you don't really notice that much difference. It's not doing anything different than what we have set up. And that's because you need to sort of add some points to this line. And in this case, I think I'll just click on and add, about 3 different points there. And I'll probably, let's bring this one up in the corner like that. And we'll bring this one up here. And if you're hard of seeing, if you need to see this larger, go ahead and click this window. And now we can see a little bit larger representation of what we're working with here. So, okay, so let's set it, I'm going to try something here. Let's set it kind of like this, kind of a sawtooth kind of pattern. All right, and bring those all the way down. So now it's just kind of a sawtooth pattern. Great. I'm going to move this out of the way. I'm going to roll in here, and let's take a look at what's happening now. As you'll notice, the particles are moving up, but they're sort of mimicking what this shape is. And that's really cool. So I'm going to rewind back here again. And in this case, maybe take a view from the top. Let's do a play. And you can't really tell what's going on from the top view there. So let's look at it on the side. As you can see, it sort of has a spiky drop off in the beginning and then another drop off. Well, if I add some more points to this, let's just say we add a couple more points in here and bring some other points up. We'll just make it even kind of like we did before. We'll bring that one down and bring that one up. And as you can see now, I have kind of a strange spiky pattern. Well, I'll go ahead and rewind that to the beginning of the simulation. And now, depending on what your max distance is set at, it's going to pick up those values as well. But it's not really picking up much more than what's in the beginning, what we had. And what you have to be aware of here is that your max distance is going to make a difference. So let's look at that manipulator tool and see where this max distance is. And right now it's in the center of the grid. Let's bring that thing way out. Let's bring the magnitude up a little bit, and then maybe bring this attenuation kind of down like that. Nice curve. Okay, now we'll take another look and see what happens. Okay, now you can see the grid moving. If I sort of come over here and we'll move around a bit. Now you can see that grid is really different. It has a really different shape to it. But that's caused by that field, or that the fall-off curve that you created. So that's kind of cool. All right. So I'm going to look at the plane field again, and we're going to sort of mess around with that. I think I'll take this fall-off curve and take away all these points, and we'll just work with that without these. So you'll notice that there's some little squares here. Just click on those points. Pretty much anything that isn't this solid white, and that'll get rid of them. The solid white here is sort of your base node, or your starting point, which by default really won't go away. All right, so that's it. Let's go back to the beginning of the animation and hit play. Okay, there go our particles. So we're back to square one. Now, if you want to come down and look at your volume control attributes, go ahead and come in and maybe hit a cube, and you can grab your scale tool there, bring your cube up a bit, and you know, go ahead and hit play. And as you can see, a totally different reaction. There's particles that are contained within this cube, and there's particles on the outside of the cube. So if you wanted all of the particles to move up like this, just go ahead and give it some more scale, and now all the particles are kind of contained within there, but they're still going to escape out the top. And you know, that's kind of a good thing to know, because you can control that down here. And essentially, when you assign it to a cube, we need to trap those particles inside. So essentially, I'd want to raise up my trap inside. And as I brought that up, you'll notice that the trap radius became active as well. So now, if I go ahead and hit play, then you'll notice that those particles get caught within that, you know, within this volume, and that's super cool. Okay, so that's really cool particle stuff. You can go ahead and switch this from a cube to, say, something like a sphere, and rewind, and let's put this whole thing inside of the sphere, and go ahead and hit play. And you'll notice that now it gives you more of a spherical type of spherical type of thing. Really pretty. All right. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so that is what that's all about. Play around with it to your heart's content. Your trap radius, this is kind of an interesting thing to see, because well, and the volume sweep. Let's go on to the volume sweep for the moment. All right. If you'll notice, it's a 360-degree sweep, and as you sort of bring that value down, you'll notice now that it's about 180, and that half of the grid is not, you know, not in the scene there, or at least not contained within the volume. So if you were to, say, hit play, you'll notice that that gives you a totally different effect as well. All right, very cool. So that's something to know about that. Now, you can play around with the volume sweep all you want. I'm going to just go ahead and bring mine back to 360, and in this case, let's take a look at the trap inside and trap radius. I'm going to go back to my my view there, and let's just go up to a top view for here. Now, you'll notice that my volume pretty much contains all of the particles in there. If I were to say, let's just see what it looks like going in from the top here to begin with. All right, so the particles play, and they're doing a geometric thing, because essentially they're perfect in geometry right now because of the way we created this. And you'll notice that they pretty much stay within this boundary. Now, if we were to go back and maybe let's bring the scale down a little bit, and let's just go into the middle here. All right, and let's go ahead and hit play. You'll notice that it gives you a totally different effect. So in this case, I think I'll just sort of bring this sphere up a little bit to contain all of my particles, and let's just go with that, and we'll go ahead and rewind to the beginning and hit play. All right, so the particles in there, they're doing their thing, and now we need to work with that that trap radius. Depending on what size your overall volume is, your trap radius may or may not have an effect. In this case, I'm going to bring that trap radius up and the inside radius up. We'll go back to the beginning and hit play. And we'll see what it does. particles, basically you're telling with the trap radius settings, you're telling it Maya to keep the particles within the perimeter bounds of your volume, or maybe in the outer realms of your sphere, or your volume. So it's basically, sometimes particles can break away and do things, and those are what those controls are for, either controlled breakaway particles, or just for keeping particles contained within your volume. So wow, that's cool. All right, so that's kind of the concept there. Now let's look at one more thing. I'm going to bring this back to the beginning here, and I think what I'll do is I'll squish my volume here. That's rotating it. I'm going to squish it a little bit, and we'll do a play. All right, so the particles are doing crazy things. Let's go back to the beginning here, and I'm going to bring this volume down a little more, and we'll go ahead and do a play on it. Nope, let's go just a little bit larger. Okay, well, anyway, you get the idea. It's going to take a long time to play around with this and get some good results with it. But remember, with this airfield, you have an axial magnitude as well that you can put points on there and sort of bring up or down depending on what you're after. Let's mess with it a little bit there. Now that's affecting the air flow, the way the air flows. So if I go ahead and hit play here, let's make our volume shape a little larger. All right, go back to the beginning of the animation, and up you go. Okay. So I know this tutorial is getting a little long, and there's lots to play around with particles. So yeah, just play around with this. It's a great concept. It's pretty easy to mess with. Just sort of mess with all your settings, and be aware of making changes and keeping an eye on kind of everything affects everything else. So okay, well, that's the particle grid. I'm glad you guys tuned in. Hope you learned something. As always, it's good to read a book. It's good to be a good person, and there you go. Learn something. All right, thanks for watching.